everybody. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to start a new drawing. It's going to be a small drawing. As a matter of fact, Alan, let me see. The drawing will be approximately this size on your full white paper. So we'll draw out the shape of the drawing, so it'll be quite a bit smaller than your white paper. And the reason we're doing that is partially because of the concept we're using. So we're going to introduce a couple design elements into this drawing just to get us thinking a little bit about composition and what's called unity. So I'll explain that here. The drawing is going to be of wrapped candy, and I'll explain that further later in the video, I should say. But let me just go over a couple of the things to think about, kind of have in the back of your mind as you're making this drawing. So the drawing includes a thing called continuous field, and we'll get back to that in a second. We also will be dealing with a design element called unity, and then also ultimately variety. So balancing between unity and variety, which I'll explain in a second. But we'll start here. Connor, describe this as a drawing. Describe this to me a little bit, and you can say anything. It's this, it's that. Like, what do you think about a drawing like this?
It's a square with a bunch of circles in it.
Okay. What else? Anybody want to add to that? What else about this drawing?
And rows and columns.
It's rows and columns, okay? So it has a pattern and it's using symmetry. All right, symmetry is an important part of this. We're actually not going to use symmetry, but very much like a box of chocolates, okay? The chocolates, when you open that box of the chocolates are often arranged according to the shape of the box they're in. So in other words, if you can fit 40 chocolates into a box and you're gonna sell it for $20, you would make that box pretty much exactly the size. So they don't jostle around, and so that when the person opens the box, it's presented nicely. So in many ways, the objects in this picture plane, in this rectangle here, are influenced or affected by the rectangle itself, okay? So we actually don't want to do that in this drawing. We don't want our information or the stuff we're drawing to be affected by the shape of the picture plane. So we're going to do a thing called continuous field. There are two photographs on our Blackboard shell, one of just an aerial shot of some leaves, and the other is an aerial shot of some leaves and some rocks, and I'll explain how those kind of fit into this. So if we think about taking a drone to Lollapalooza and going up 20 or 30 feet and taking a couple shots of the crowd, okay? When you look at that photograph, you get a sense of continuous field. What does that mean? That means that when you look at that rectangle, you get a sense that there's more beyond the rectangle. All the people that you just took a photograph of don't fit in there neatly like a box of chocolates. They're a little more random, and they clearly go off the edge of the page. If you could grab the corner of the photograph and look beyond, you could imagine that there would be more out there, okay? One of the problems, though, when you're trying to create unity, which is a kind of a oneness, okay, is that ultimately the drawing or the piece of art could become boring. So yes, you've achieved unity. There's a sense of oneness and there's a sense of cohesion amongst the stuff that you're taking a photo of, like that photograph of an aerial photograph of Lollapalooza. There's a little bit of variety in that photograph. So it's all people, okay, and depending on how high your drone is, but it's all people. The variety comes in is that they're all different people. They're all different shapes. They have different colored clothing on, different colored hair, whatever. So there's some variety in there, but again, depending on how high you zoom out, there's not a lot. It kind of just looks like the same. It's almost like taking a photograph of a cornfield from a drone. So what we want to do in our drawing is we want to experiment with continuous field, giving the viewer of our drawing a sense that there's more out there. We want to create a sense of oneness but we also want to inject enough variety in there so it's interesting and it doesn't just become boring, okay? So I'll just give you an example using X's and O's, okay? So, all right, so Connor is gonna pay me $2,000 to do this drawing or this painting, and he wants circles, okay? So I go over to Connor's house after my first attempt. He also wants a little continuous field, so he wants the objects or the circles to look as though they're going off the page. So I show up and Connor looks at his painting that he's about to pay $2,000 for, and he's like, I don't like it, okay? Yeah, you got circles, yeah, it's got a continuous field, but it's just kind of boring, okay? So I'm like, all right, and I go back to the studio and I start to incorporate maybe overlapping, okay? I also change the scale of things. Okay, so I add a few more things, and I go back to Connor. He's like, okay, now we're talking. Now I'm starting to like it a little bit more. You added more information, so it's basically busier. We still have a good sense of unity. The circles help pull it all together, even though they're all different sizes. We've injected some variety by using overlapping, accentuating that idea of continuous field and different size circles. But he's like, I'm not ready to pay you $2,000. It's just kind of, it's just sort of boring, okay? So I try one more time. I go back to the studio and I start putting some X's in. Okay, some different size X's. Go back to Connor one more time, and he's like, you know what? I really like the X's. I really, this is working. It's busier than I wanted, but I still like it. But boy, I'd like you to go just a little bit further with this. Okay. So now I'm kind of like getting irritated with Connor, and I'm gonna go back to my studio. All right. And he wants more. Okay. Now this is where you sort of tip that balance, right? So I end up freaking out. Okay. And I'm not really mad at you, Connor, but I'm mad at Connor, and I'm just, now he doesn't like my work, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so I go back to Connor, and Connor's like, the deal's off. This thing is a mess, okay? So what happens with Unity is, and it could be anything, it could be a painting, it could be drawing. In many ways, it applies to design, graphic design, it applies to interior design. Fashion design, Versace, like Donatella Versace is known for having mismatched patterns and just really loud, colors, bright colors, and sometimes she sort of takes it a little too far. All right, whereas more like a Calvin Klein is maybe like too minimal, doesn't take it far enough, and it's like gray, black all the time. So even those fashion designers are trying to kind of balance that unity and variety, okay? Musicians, okay? Think about a rap musician. They're in there doing their raps, they put a couple beats down, and they get an engineer involved. They do a little guitar, some horns, and this and that, and after a while the engineer's like, whoa, way too much stuff, okay? We need to sort of peel that back a little bit more and kind of get down to the essence of the song. So that's all very similar to what we're going to be doing. What I've done with this piece is I've gone too far with it. I've used too much variety. I lost my unity and I just created clutter. Okay, so we don't want that to happen. We want that kind of nice balance. Okay. There's more information on this, but what I want you to think of this drawing as, and a great way to visualize it is you are in a spaceship traveling through space and you encounter an asteroid that is made out of candy, an asteroid belt that is all candy. So what I want you to do is, like, if you think of a lot of people think of like a sucker as this, right? Okay? But if you go like this, and you can say, well, that's a sucker too, right? It's just an aerial version of it. Or maybe you have your suckers like this, tumbling through space. Okay, maybe it's coming up like this. So I want you to get creative with how you're drawing your suckers. Don't just lay them on the desk every time. Okay, we also don't really care about scale. So we want to have a Tootsie Roll. This is probably close to scale. but we want to have a Tootsie Roll can be much smaller or much larger than it actually is. So don't worry about scale, make them big and small. Plan on your overlapping. If something's going to overlap something, you've got to plan on that and kind of make sure that you get that squared away before you go. You may want to start it lightly with a pencil and kind of lay it out a little bit before you start your slow contour. We're going to be talking about slow contour. There are 2 other videos on Blackboard that deal with slow contour, but basically slow contour is a kind of drawing which uses a single incisive line. You really try to not lift your pencil at all. You want to vary the weight of your line, so a darker line when you need a darker line and a lighter line when you need a lighter line. That line is used to document changes in structure, color, and value, or the lightness or darkness of something, okay? So that is kind of how we're going to do this drawing. So go ahead and make sure that you watch the 2 slow contour drawing videos as well to accompany this. And remember that your drawing is only roughly the size of like a magazine, okay, not much bigger. I've got some templates we can use, but you could just kind of make it smaller than your white paper. And you are going to be drawing your candy. Your candy can be fully wrapped. It can be in the process of being unwrapped. It can be in the process of being eaten. You only need 1 Tootsie Roll because you can draw it multiple times. You can use your camera to take photos of it at different angles. We're not looking for a pretty picture. We're not looking for patterning. We're really looking for more of like a randomness to it. Again, thinking about that asteroid belt just sort of tumbling through space. But people have interpreted it a bunch of different ways and come up with some really cool ideas too. So you can use your creativity a little bit to a point. We don't want to get too far away from continuous field and trying to capture unity and variety, drawing candy using slow contour. So thank you. All right.